this is your first time here, welcome. If you are back from last week's video, thank you for coming back. I appreciate it very much. This week on Conversations Through Confession, we got a little bit of a topic to talk about. This topic popped up based on some homework that my boss actually gave me. So my boss does this thing at work where she gets all the young people together and we talk about life and stuff that would affect us. And her homework to us was to figure out, or try to remember where our 7-year-old selves were. So where we were emotionally, spiritually, how we felt, where we were physically. She wanted us to kind of reminisce on that and be able to communicate with our 7-year-old selves. And while I'm not going to answer that question because I'm going to leave that for our work conversation, it sparked another train of thought in my head. And this one, interestingly enough, is something that I more so recently discovered. Never really noticed that it was as big a thing as it was until maybe like 2 years ago or so. I did not grow up. I didn't spend most of my childhood with my mom and dad. I grew up with my extended family. So that's my grandmother, great-grandmother, uncle, aunts, cousins, the whole nine. I didn't actually start or have any experience living with either one of my parents until I was actually in high school. And so as a kid, I had numerous confrontations with classmates, schoolmates, and just other kids in general in regards to the whereabouts of my parents and their actual existence. And at some point, that started to affect the way I would behave. I know for the most part that it played a very big impact in even who I am today and how I interact with people. So all that to say, this episode, I'm thinking of naming it Trading Places, Value versus Validation. One, your value comes from inside. Validation is coming from an outside source, right? And so I remember, like, as a kid, after a certain point, I was just striving to be the best at everything. Oh my God. I spent most of my childhood being top of my class. And I mean top of my class. There were very few terms where I was not number one in the grade or in the class. So as a kid, that's what my mentality was. I just needed to be the best at everything. And it was because I knew that when I was the best, when I could prove that I was the best, when I was being recognized as the best, I don't know why I always say when I was recognized as the best, I would get recognition, I would get applause, I would get pats on the back, I would get awards, I would get people showing love to me, I would get people showing pride in me. And as someone who could feel a certain emptiness and not understand what that emptiness was coming from, that temporary pride, that temporary recognition filled that emptiness for me. And that emptiness, I would later realize, would just be me not feeling the love from my parents. I'm not saying they didn't love me. I'm saying I could not feel it. Like, it wasn't something I could readily identify. So I didn't create a place for it in my life, basically. So that's where the emptiness was. And so that validation from everyone outside of me, my family, people in my country and all that stuff, friends and all that, that filled that void for me, even temporarily. And anytime I could get that high, anytime I could have that void filled, I was going for it, which is why I always strive to be the best. at some point I started to realize that me being the best at everything and bringing pride to my family, I felt like that was the only value I had. I felt that since I wasn't technically their child, right? Because again, I'm being taken care of by my extended family. They have their own kids to worry about. I'm related to them, yes, but they're not my biological mom and dad. They're my extended family. So I felt that in exchange for them taking care of me, I needed to show them my value. Hence the overachievement. And it got to a point where if I was not my definition of perfection, if I was not doing the absolute best that I could, then I had failed and my value had diminished. And there was nothing keeping them from getting rid of me. That's how I thought. That's how I felt. And in reality, that wasn't true. But that is how I felt. That is how I lived. And so I realized that later on, because that's how I thought about myself and that's how I related myself to my family, it manifested itself later on into people pleasing in a massive way. And I'm talking about to my detriment. And my value, even as an adult, because I didn't realize the depth of this until about 2-3 years ago while I was teaching. I never realized how much of my value, of the way I felt that I was impacting the world and my importance to the world. I didn't realize how much of that was based on the validation I was receiving from people outside of me. And there was a point where I was no longer getting that validation. There was a brief point where I was no longer getting that validation. I was no longer excelling in school. I didn't have the great job that I said I was going to have by that age. I did not have the successful relationship that I thought I was going to have at that age. I wasn't going out building homeless shelters and feeding the hungry and stuff. I was doing none of that. I was not being my best self. And so I was getting no validation. And my sense of value plummeted. I mean, like, hit the floor, did not know what to do with myself anymore, did not feel worthy. I just couldn't find the meaning in my life anymore, because if I could no longer do things that made people proud of me and that made people recognize me and that made people praise me, then I was wasting a life, is basically how I saw it. And there was so much that I needed to unpack, because what was really happening, I didn't need that validation from my family members. I didn't need the validation from people in my country. I didn't need the validation from my friends. I simply wanted my value to be validated by my parents. I simply wanted my parents, the two people that came together to create me, to validate the value that I had in this world. Because when I thought about it, these are the two people that, again, they came together to create me. So in a sense, I thought of it as God giving me my value through these two people. That's how I saw it. And the fact that they were so far removed from me and like my upbringing and the very core and substance of who I am as a person, I felt that my value was lacking. And because they weren't coming in and praising me and like basically worshiping me as their kid, like, oh my God, and telling me, reaffirming me that I was so important to them and that I was a really big part of their lives, and they were so happy to have me and that kind of thing. I felt like I had no value. There was no value in my life. There was nothing. They didn't validate me. And so I had no value. I was worth nothing. My life meant nothing. I meant nothing. And although I know that that is not true, it was still a very big pill to swallow, because at the time I believed it. And I had to get to a point where I had to start reading a lot of self-help books, as cliche as it is. I had to get back to reading a lot of self-help books. And the very first one that I turned to, believe it or not, was the Bible. And I know a lot of people have feelings about the Bible and how inaccurate it may be and whatnot, but going through it and realizing how much God did to get me here and how important I am to God, and just knowing that I was wanted and that I was special and I was worthy of him sending Jesus to die for me and all that stuff, like all of it. I internalized that and I took it personal, and that was the start of me not rebuilding my value, but planting roots in order for it to blossom. And while it's still a work in progress. I'm still evolving as a person. I'm still working on who I am and who I want to be and who I'm going to show up as in this world every day. I'm happy to know that 7-year-old me, elementary school me, although she fought very hard to be validated, I know that she can rest assured knowing that from 7-year-old me, this version of me, has done the work to understand that no matter who it is, parent or not, my value cannot be determined from anywhere else but here. It's me, whether they want me or not, and they being anyone, a partner, parents, family, whether they want me or not, I still have value. Whether they clap for me or not, I still have value. Whether they validate how I feel and the importance I think I have in this world, I still have value, because I'm the only one that can create it. And therefore, I am the only one who can destroy it. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. See you next week on Conversations Through Confession.